Meinlander, like von Hartmann before him, also adopted the Hegelian idea that history moves towards a goal. This was a clear departure from Schopenhauer, because Schopenhauer had argued that the world is fundamentally without purpose or goals, characterized only by constant and meaningless striving. Meinlander rejected this, but not in the way the usual Hegelian would. For Meinlander, history doesn't end in the realization of human freedom or self-consciousness or anything like that. Rather, for him, the purpose of history was nothingness, to die out, to stop existing. Because he deemed life fundamentally negative, the only way to eradicate suffering was to eradicate the world. And luckily for us, this will happen. It's the movement of history. Here we approach perhaps the strangest and most mythical part of Meinlander's philosophy. He starts with a metaphysical problem. Why does it simultaneously seem as if, on the one hand, the world is unified, a single whole where everything is interdependent, and on the other hand, as if the world is fragmented into a billion different objects? In other words, is the world one, or is it many? Engaging in some wild metaphysical speculation, Meinlander answers that it's not either one or the other, but that rather there is a continual movement from one to the other, from the one to the many. In the beginning of time, the world was nothing but a single undivided unity. However, a split occurred, and it began a process by which the world increasingly moves from unity to fragmentation, from the one to the many, from interdependence to independence, and from unfreedom to freedom. A kind of story to help us make sense of the world by ascribing human qualities to it. This single undivided unity existing at the beginning of time, he names God. After all, it had many of the qualities commonly attributed to God. God, however, was horrified at the thought of existing, because he saw that non-existence is preferable to existence, and so he wanted to die. However, he could not commit suicide without violating his own nature as God, and so he had to commit suicide by proxy, so to speak, by first dividing himself into fragments which would over time rot, disintegrate, and finally disappear into nothingness, achieving God's intended goal of non-existence. In other words, the universe we live in is the rotting corpse of God.